Mark Kenyon, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thank you for having me.
So, because I have to head to school in a little bit, I want to ask your senior year of high school, your English class, where are you sitting? What are you doing? And what was your grade?
Geez, wow. The details
Heater
will
right
be
off
a
the bat.
yeah, the details will be a little bit iffy, but if I remember right, I was usually sitting somewhere in the front half of the class in English because I liked that topic. I enjoyed writing, sort of, and I definitely enjoyed reading. And my grade would have been pretty good. I think I was getting A's in English. And were you kind of curious about, I might have missed the front part of the question. Were you curious about what I was generally doing and thinking at that time of year, or just the grade and where I was sitting?
Well, it's what you're sometimes people are they're doodling about something else, so they're planning their life outside of it. So, were you an attentive student? Did you pay attention? Did you answer questions? Or were you showing up late with McDonald's?
Yeah, so again, I was pretty decent at English. So I was showing up on time. I might have been thinking a little bit about the future, but if it was an engaging part of the class, I would be
Mhm.
paying attention. Now, so I loved reading even back then, but I definitely remember not liking the stuff that was assigned in English class as much as the stuff I would have picked out myself. So I would have been interested in reading books about climbing mountains or going on some big adventure to somewhere like Alaska or hunting or fishing or sports. Those types of books would have been really engaging. I remember though I was not excited to be reading and talking about Jane Eyre or Of Mice and Men
Yeah.
or something like that. So I definitely would have been daydreaming about wishing I was either doing or reading something else. That's for sure.
Yeah, so I can't imagine that you were thinking when someone asked you, "Hey, what are you going to do after graduation?" Oh, I'm going to go to Michigan State and then I'm going to start a website in 2008 and then I'm going to get a job at Google and then I'm going to leave my Google job to pursue my website. That was probably not in the answer of what I'm going to do.
It definitely was not. I had no idea those things would transpire. If you told me that I was doing what I'm doing now back then, I would have been really thrilled.
Mhm.
It would have sounded great, but I don't think any of these things seemed within the realm of possibility. I think at that point in my life, I thought that I was probably gonna do something related to business, but I had really no clue what that would look like. I did not have a clear sense of mission or purpose or really any kind of direction of what I was gonna do. So anyone in that stage now should not feel bad if that's how they feel as well. Because I think it's
Mhm.
pretty common that when you're a senior in high school, you start getting this pressure to know what you're supposed to do. Like, right, you got to make some choices about if you're going to go to college, and if so, where, and if so, what are you going to do? Or if you're not going to go to college, and what kind of job are you going to get? And I don't think anyone really has it figured out right out the gate. Very few, at least.
Mhm. I had a student last year. I was asking him what their dreams were, and I said, "It doesn't matter if you have a dream or not. Just move forward in some regard, and if you have something that stands out as a pursuit, then that's great." But a kid said he didn't have a dream; he just wanted to be a lineman. I was like, "Dude, you have a career that you want to pursue. That's great." And he said he wanted
Yeah,
to go down to Idaho to do that. I said, "Phenomenal elk hunting! Like you're setting yourself up very, very well to have a
yeah,
very happy, content life if you work hard."
yeah, yeah.
So, as your journey is kind of changing and evolving, what were some of the key moments when you were maybe in college? Why'd you start the website? And then later you get the job at Google, but then you go back to the website. Like, how did what were some of the, I guess, influences or what motivated some of those decisions?
Yeah. So, the key foundational I guess the foundation that has led to where I am now is the fact that I was raised in a family that valued the outdoors. So all of our time on the weekend, not all, but if we were ever going to do something special, if we were ever going to go on vacation, if we were ever going to go somewhere, it was usually somewhere to do something outdoor related. So we were going up to northern Michigan to our cabin to hunt or fish or scout. We were heading somewhere to go camping. We were going to my mom's uncle's place in the Adirondack Mountains of New York to go canoeing and camping and hiking and all that kind of stuff. So from a very early age, I was steeped in a love for the outdoors. So that has always been my thing. But as I went through school, there was also a little bit of interest in business and marketing and advertising. And so when I was heading off to college, it seemed like that would make sense to pursue. I never imagined the outdoors was a place you could make a career. So when I went to college, got a business degree, the website came about this summer before my senior year of college. I had taken an internship in New York City working for an advertising and PR agency. So I was living in Manhattan, right in the middle of the concrete jungle, doing this internship that I thought was kind of like the dream job, supposed to be at least. And I was miserable. I was stuck in the city and I couldn't get outside to do the things I loved. I was surrounded by noise and chaos and concrete and missing the outdoors. And my job was working with websites and bloggers, people that had websites and blogs about products that my clients, wanted to get out there to the masses. So I was, reaching out to a blogger or a writer and trying to encourage them to write about Reebok shoes or to encourage them to write about Tommy Hilfiger or whatever it is. And that's when I kind of realized, like, oh, wow, there are these people out there who have a passion for something. Maybe it's sneakers, maybe it's fashion, maybe it's sports, and they're writing about it. And then people are sending them free stuff and people are paying them to do this. And that's kind of when I realized there was this whole world beginning online around passions and projects and different activities. And I thought, well, why couldn't I start something like that about my passion and my love? So that's when I decided to start this website called Wired to Hunt. And it was just basically a way to scratch the itch. I couldn't go out deer hunting. I couldn't get outside hiking and scouting and doing all that kind of stuff, but I could write about it. And so, yeah, the summer of 2008, I started this website, and that kind of got me through that summer in Manhattan. I'd come home at night and work on this thing and kind of think back on all my memories and write these stories and explore other aspects. And it helped me feel like I was doing those things. So that was the first big inflection point when I started that. Now, fast forward a year later, and I took a full-time job now after college with Google, as you mentioned, and they send me out to their headquarters in California, just outside of San Francisco. And again, I'm feeling the same kind of way. I'm feeling like I'm stuck in the city. I'm around people that aren't interested in the same things I'm interested in. I'm missing the outdoors, and I returned to Wired to Hunt as a way to scratch that itch. But it went from being just a way to kind of satiate my desires to actually a career after I read a book that first probably month while working at Google. I read a book called Crush It by a guy named Gary Vaynerchuk.
Yeah, yeah.
And the subtitle is Cash In on Your Passion. So it's all about building a career around what you're passionate about and using the digital tools and economy to do that. And that's when I realized, like, oh, wow, I could take this website that I built as just a fun thing to do. I could turn that into a real career opportunity if I really doubled down on it and took it serious. And so that was the fall of 2009. That's when I decided to really get serious about learning how to build an online brand, learning how to use online marketing tools, learning how to write well, learning how to use social media and all these different platforms to share my message and my stories. And from that point on, it was work, 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 work. I'd do the full-time day job at Google. Then I'd come home and work all night on Wired to Hunt. I'd get up early the next morning and work on Wired to Hunt more. I'd work on it during my lunch break. And it didn't feel like work, though, because I was so excited about it, because I was so passionate about it. And, that's been kind of the story ever since. I continued working on Wired to Hunt for 4 years while working at Google. And then after 4 years, I was able to quit Google and go full time in the outdoor world doing this and continue that for another 4 years more of doing that on my own. And then 4 years later, joined MeatEater, merged what I'm doing with Wired to Hunt with the larger MeatEater network. And now it's been, I think, 8 years doing that.
Mhm. As you're deciding of whether or not you should make these big jumps, what was that conversation like? Did you make a Venn diagram? Was it a pros and cons list, or was it kind of a just jump? Because some people just jump at opportunities, burn the ships, whatnot, or are you a little bit more methodical when you're making these decisions?
Definitely on the methodical side. I am an analytical guy, so there were pros and cons lists. There were thinking through best case scenarios, worst case scenarios, developing safety nets and contingency plans, and thinking through long term strategies, all of those kinds of things. But when I made all of these big decisions, I would say there was a couple North Stars. The number one North Star was following my curiosity, excitement, and passion. Because one thing, my grandpa was one of the first people to instill this and this, and then my father. It was just if you are truly passionate and excited about something, if you love it, it won't feel like work. It will feel like something you genuinely want to do. And if you genuinely are excited about your work, you are going to excel at it and you're going to work really hard at it. And if you do those things, well, then everything else will take care of itself. And so when I made decisions that allowed me to do that, to follow that curiosity, excitement, and passion, it's always led me in the right direction. And when I have that natural energy source, then yeah, I would work all night and all day because again, I'm genuinely excited about it. When there's a fire in your belly, it's really hard not to do really good at that work.
Mhm.
And so that was the number one thing. The second thing I would say with many of these fork in the road decisions is that I've learned that if there is one of the two options that is a little bit scarier, that I can feel apprehension and worry about it, if it will force me to get outside of my comfort zone and will force me to grow and change, I usually know I've found now that that's usually the way that I should go. So the decision that's going to force you into a new area, force you to take that next step, force you outside of the comfortable, that's been a clue to me that yeah, that's what you probably should head towards,
Mhm.
and that served me well. So yeah, those are a couple of the things that have been on my mind as I've made these decisions. I've tried to pursue things that I'm excited about. I've tried to pursue things that I think there's an important cause or mission behind. That's guided me in these later stages of my career as I've moved from just being able to do something that I like to now wanting to work on things that I think make a difference. And that's been important as well.
Mhm. There has to be some elements of, like, people talk about the careers, and if it's something that you love to do, then you never work a day in your life. And like, that's a really great ethos. There has to be days or times when it is a slog, though. So how do you get through the slog? And I look back at my teaching career, and there are times when you kind of have that youthful exuberance too. And then after a while, sometimes it's not burnout because you still feel a purpose, but some days are easier to get through than others. There are certain things that you have to deal with now that you think, man, this is all the extra stuff. I would like to get back to those foundational days when I was staying up late to do this because it was the actual thing. Has there been, and how do you combat maybe I don't want to say staleness because it seems like you're super happy and you're loving it, but times where it's not as easy as it's not maybe what you first expected.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. There are times like that. With any job, I think you're going to have that because it's a job and there's going to be some days when even the thing you originally loved begins to feel like work because there are the obligations of work placed upon it and the pressures of work placed upon it. And then there are also parts of jobs that are just inherently not as much fun, right? The administrative stuff or there's going to be boxes you have to check. There's going to be sometimes people that are hard to get along with or whatever it is. So yes, that is all true. And that is true even for my job that, in many ways is a dream job, but I absolutely have times that I'm burned out where I'm frustrated, where I'm not enjoying it. And I would say there's a couple things that I do. Number one, sometimes you just have to grit your teeth and bear with it because that's just part of life. But I do often try when I find myself ever kind of spiraling in negativity in those moments, I will have to kind of pinch myself and step back and try to have some perspective and remember where I am and how fortunate the circumstances are. And even on the bad days with what I do, it's still so much better than the best days of what I used to be doing. So having perspective is really important for me. I have a kind of a daily practice that helps me with this a lot. It's really simple and maybe it's cheesy, but every morning I write down three things I'm grateful for, specific things. So it's not like my health. It'll be more specific, like a very specific thing that happened yesterday that I'm thankful for, or a very specific thing that happened this morning. And I think in the context of work, that's very important because you can get so caught up in the everyday drudgery or whatever's going on that you lose perspective about how genuinely good certain things are when you're just stuck in the day-to-day slog. So having that perspective, having that gratitude helps, and having that practice kind of gives me a moment to pause and remember the good stuff. Secondly, I would say, you know, I continue to remember that you're never, or at least hopefully, you're not ever stuck in any one lane forever. And so sometimes I'll find like, man, what used to be the thing that did it for me maybe doesn't quite do it for me anymore, or maybe not 100%. And so in moments where I'm feeling that burnout and times when I'm feeling the drudgery of it or I'm losing the passion, I will try to uncover where that flicker still is and feed that. So, maybe it's just realizing like, gosh, you know what? Like an example would be I do a podcast as well. I do a podcast every week. I've been doing it for more than 10 years now, generally about the same topic every single week. And sometimes that can become, I'm losing areas to explore that are new without it becoming kind of the same old, same old. And so to rekindle some of that excitement, I might say, you know what, we're going to go in a totally different direction for a couple weeks here and dive into this other thing that I'm really actually genuinely interested in that maybe doesn't seem like it relates to our usual topic, but actually there's these very surprising connection points here. And so by kind of allowing myself to go off the reservation, to try new things, that will reignite some of that excitement too. So giving yourself permission to try new things, giving yourself permission to chase those butterflies of interest that maybe you think don't necessarily belong, but taking those moments can go a long ways. So those are a few of the things that have helped me.
Yeah, monetizing the passion can be a tricky thing because it ceases to be what it was. I have a bunch of friends who said you should guide during the summer. As a teacher, you have the time off, so you should guide us. Well, if I'm guiding, then I'm not fishing. I like to fish. I don't want to teach people about fishing because the rest of my career is teaching people.
Yeah.
So, are there times when you need time for yourself? Because I do freelance writing too, and there are some times where I'm out there and I don't want to write the story that's happening. And I'm already thinking about the column that I'm writing, and I'm already thinking about this and angles, and I'm not really enjoying the experience as much as I should because I'm worried about angles. And I want to write a successful article. And I want to write a this, but it's not looking like the deer are going to cooperate. So, do you have times where you just like this is an off the books hunt, or this is I'm not going to write about it, this isn't going to be filmed, this is just me and nothing else? Do you have those moments, or you have those opportunities so not everything is a marketable experience?
Yeah, I think that is critical to have that. Like that's the trick to being able to keep it fun and not all, because the work side of it just completely changes the experience. And so yes, I need to, I try to increasingly find time to have hunts that are just a for me experience hunt, because that's what refuels you. That's what puts gas back in the tank to allow you to still enjoy it and allow you to do your job when it is that time. And for me, most of my work related outdoor activities are on the hunting side. And so fishing for me is something that I love just as much, but do not have nearly the obligations from a work perspective on that. And so fishing is like the place that I go to refuel. So hunting season, that feels like work a little bit more. Still love it, but there's all the work pressures. Fishing is just pure joy, pure filling my cup, and that is the yin to my hunting yang. And so that refills the tank. That gives me a lot of energy and excitement, and there's no strings attached. There's no obligations attached to it, and that's been really important for me to have that too. So yes, I absolutely agree. If you're going to try to build a career around your passion, that's great. I'm very glad that I did it, even though there are times when it feels like work. That's okay. It's still way better than I think it would have been otherwise. But preserving some of that still just for you, creating those spaces, creating those opportunities to just get back in touch with why you got into this in the first place. That's so important.
So that's a perfect segue to your summer adventures in Alaska. I know you'd been here before, but was the king salmon that you caught this summer? Was that the first king salmon? And then you also went to Bristol Bay. So, I mean, those are some, some bucket list moments.
Yeah. So, like you said, second visit to Alaska, but absolutely a just incredible trip. Didn't catch a king. I caught
Mm,
some cohos,
okay.
caught some big silvers. But yeah, first time fishing in Alaska, and it was everything you could dream of. I'm sure it's different living there, but being someone from down south, you dream of Alaska all your life, and to finally get up there and to do these things, see these things with your own eyes, it's spectacular. So like you mentioned, I went up and I did a deer hunt in Southeast Alaska. That was incredible. Got to get up in some alpine territory, do some serious hiking up there and climbing up into the alpine and seeing deer doing their thing unbothered by people. Just an incredible setting and hunt. And it was successful. Tagged a nice blacktail buck up there. Got to do some trolling down there around Juneau and caught some silver, some big fish. That was really cool. Saw some humpback whales, got to hike up to a glacier and see all that. That was spectacular. And then, as you mentioned, then for the second week, went up towards Bristol Bay and fished for rainbows on the Kvichak River and got to learn a lot about what's happening up there with the proposed pebble mine and just really sink my teeth into a incredible watershed and caught all sorts of rainbows and a few salmon and a bunch of big grayling and just just loved it. I'm hoping to be actually coming going back this year again for a different project, and I probably Alaska residents don't like to hear of Southerners wanting to go up more and more because I know you want to keep it to yourselves, but I think you're gonna have a hard time getting rid of me because
Yeah.
I'm gonna get up there as much as I possibly can.
I think it really depends on the story that people tell. You know, Ketchikan is very dependent on tourists. We had 1.5 or 1.8 million people off cruise ships this last year. So it's without logging, without mining, without these other industries that have gone out, there's really nothing else as far as infrastructure goes. And so we need that revenue. So it's a tough thing. We are reliant on them, but it is a lot of fun to be able to see people come up and really appreciate it. You have the people that come up and they expect 50-pound king salmon and they're rude and they're entitled and but there's also so many people who are so excited to see a humpback whale. You can't help but think, man, I don't even like look as much anymore. Or like probably not humpback whales because we like those, but even like eagles. People are just fascinated by eagles. I'm like, man,
Yeah,
yeah, I should be more fascinated by eagles. I get to see them all the time. I should appreciate
yeah,
that. So I think it is a reminder for people when people come up and they tell the story of wonder and they love it and they want to preserve it. They want to like responsible use of it. And I think that's a really beneficial thing. But yeah, it's there are times when we start to think, man, this is getting a little bit crowded. That was always one of the temptations that I had as a writer. I could write about where to fish and how to fish, but then I thought, man, this is my home river. And I remember growing up and there were people who would come to the river and they would kind of push us off, the spot, and they would because they spent all the money to come up here and then, I'm just a little 12-year-old kid, and they want to catch the fish because they paid the money. And so I have some of those memories and I don't want to resent people for it because that was just you can't paint every tourist or every fisherman as that person who was a jerk. Like that was an isolated, that person was a jerk. So people come up and tell great stories and care about it and want to protect it. They're the people that Alaskans often really, really like. So what was the project? Was it just fun or was it just what are you working on?
two projects actually. One, I have a film that I'm working on for Meat Eater that will be coming out sometime this year, and that is what the black-tailed deer hunt was for. And so that's going to be the story of this black-tailed deer hunt and a larger kind of ecological story that I guess it's a little bit about Sitka blacktails as well as other species moving into Alaska and why that's happening and how that's happening and what that means for the future. So that's a larger project that'll be really interesting. I'm excited to start sharing that with the world. So that was part one of the trip. And then the second part of the trip, which was involving the salmon and the trout and the fishing and pebble mine and all that kind of stuff, that is for a book I'm working on that is exploring the biodiversity crisis, basically the threats to fish and wildlife across the world. So this book is about that situation, specifically in America, and the angle and opportunities that hunters and anglers have to be a part of the solution to that. And so I've been traveling the country, meeting with different hunters and anglers, conservationists, researchers, scientists to understand what's happening, why are so many fish and wildlife species struggling or threatened in various ways, and what can we do to make sure we can stop the bleeding and protect and conserve these critters and these wild places. And so that's what that part was.
Mm. Pebble Mine is super interesting. I'm on my third bumper sticker because it just never goes away. It seems
Yeah,
like it's dead, but it never goes away. And that's I've never met an Alaskan who is for it. I've met some people who are okay with the road to Ambler just because it's an access road to an area that most Alaskans can't go anyway. And some people they look at the Dalton Highway and think, well, the Hall Road was not it was just meant as the service place for the pipeline. And now that it's open to the
right.
public, you can access an area of Alaska that you wouldn't ordinarily be able to access because not everybody
Yeah,
can afford flyouts and whatnot. So people are kind of they're okay with drilling. They're okay with maybe the Ambler Road, and other people say no to the Ambler Road because obviously it's going to be there's going to be 2,000 or however many culverts, and it's going to cross 6 or 9 major rivers, and
yeah,
it's going to intersect the lower portion of the Brooks Range, and so the amount of habitat that's going to be impacted, if not ruined, is going to be substantial. Whereas Bristol Bay is so absolutely clearly absurd and destructive. I can't. I'm terrified still, even though it just always looks like it's about dead. So, what was kind of in the back of your head as you're fishing? Was it how can people be so greedy? It was it. There's also the technological piece. Like the more technology we use and the more electricity we need, and our use is so high. There's a demand for all these minerals, and we have to
yeah,
get them from somewhere. It's like, oh my gosh, it's certainly not easy, but
yeah. I mean, a couple things were on my mind throughout the entire trip. Number one, I was just constantly struck with this realization that what we have or what you have still in Alaska is what
you
we
can
have
say we. It's you can yeah.
when we are Americans. So what we have in Alaska is what we have mostly lost in the lower 48. And I find myself all the time down the lower 48, traveling across the Great Plains or hiking up in the mountains and thinking to myself, man, this is great, but can you imagine what this must have been like when Lewis and Clark first struck across this in the early 1800s? Wow, what that must have been like when they had herds of buffalo streaming across the plains in the tens of thousands or millions. I find myself imagining that all the time. And then I get to be up in Alaska in the mountains and watching thousands and thousands of caribou stream across in front of me. And I remind myself, like, I am living that right now. This is what it used to be like down the lower 48, but we still have it here in Alaska. We still have that. So there's so much still intact that is worth protecting that we've already lost in the lower 48. So let's not make those same mistakes again. What we used to have is still there in Alaska. We can protect that. It's incredible that we still have that now in 2024. And it just seems even more important now than ever to protect these last remnants of wild that we have in the world. That is a increasingly rare resource. And it just seems to be something that is so precious that it would be an absolute tragedy to lose that. Now, to your point, there are ever growing demands for resources, and we need that for modern life. But I just feel like these wild resources are just as important as gold or oil or timber and golly, we're not going to get them back once we lose them. And so there's got to be a little bit of value placed on that. And so a lot of it though comes to bringing attention to it, helping understand the value, connecting people with those things. So while I was up there, I was thinking about the fact that gosh, there's this incredible thing worth fighting for still. There was a little bit of this worry, like you mentioned, like, golly, the demand for these things, our unsatiable desire as a species for more and more and more, right? That's scary. You can become a little nihilistic when you think about it because you look at the trend of, the last 200 years, 300 years. It's just we're biting away at this stuff more and more and more and more and more, and it's really been hard to slow it down. And so sometimes I'll get kind of negative about it, but then I'm reminded that every once in a while we catch ourselves and we stop and we pause and we fix things. And I think when you look at what we did in the late 1800s, early 1900s, that was a really good example of what's still possible because, we were flooding across the United States and destroying basically everything in our paths. So many wildlife species nearly went extinct. We almost lost buffalo, elk, deer, bear. I mean, everything was basically brought almost to a screeching halt. And we tapped the brakes and we said, whoa, we've gone too far. We didn't realize we could actually make an impact this way. We really can. We need to change our ways. We need to find ways to do this differently so that, yes, we can grow as a country and as a civilization, but we can do it in such a way that we can still preserve some wild places, still preserve these other species alongside of us. And that changed the trajectory of our relationship with wild animals and wild places. And that's the only reason why we still have, flourishing populations of elk in the lower 48 states and white-tailed deer, and grizzly bears are making a comeback again, and there's wolves again, and there's mountain lions spreading across the country again. And so in many ways, we have proven that we can right our wrongs. We've proven that we can moderate a little bit. We've proven that we can take a different path. And so I'm hopeful that we can do that again. And that as we're kind of nearing another one of these inflection points where a lot of wild places and wild animals are again trending down and the pressures are mounting, I guess I have faith in us as a people that we can care about something more than just ourselves.
Mhm.
And so being out there in Alaska on this trip, I was reminded of how powerful these places and animals are. If you can connect people with them, if you can connect people with these landscapes, you can't help but feel something really deep, a deep connection to these things, very primal, that can then, I think, help give a person a reason to want to moderate, to want to work, to advocate, to fight for these things. And so that's one of my jobs, I think, is helping connect that, is helping bridge those gaps, is helping people understand that we still have this amazing, amazing place and resource and wild animals that are really deserving of our care and respect. And I believe we can do it.
That's kind of how you closed your book, That Wild Country, with you were talking about you were in the Yukon, Charlie, for the caribou hunt, and then talking about the keeping it because I think your firstborn was pretty young at that time. And you took the trip away and you wanted it that kind of flipped a switch that it's not just about me and preserving it for me, but it's also for that next generation. I'm feeling that too with my daughter's almost 4 months old and just well, what is she going to have, what's going to be left, or
Yeah.
like what experiences is she going to be able to, because we're going to take her out on hunts, but when you're 1 or 2 years old you don't really remember it, so there's going to be pictures of her, but
Yeah.
what is she going to be able to experience, and what's that going to be?
Yeah. Yeah. And that has been a huge motivator for me was since having kids. I now have my boys are almost 7 and 5 now. They turn 7 and 5 in a couple weeks. And that's crazy how fast that's happened. And that's what gets me more fired up than anything to just keep on working on these things, to keep on doing anything I can to protect these opportunities, these places, these animals, the wild the wild places and animals here on this earth have given me so much. I mean, so much, so many of the greatest experiences of my life have come from these wild places. And I so badly want those opportunities to be there for my boys. And I just feel a strong obligation to give back and make sure that that's available for not just my own kids, but other generations too. It's just being out there is so powerful. Being able to, whether you hunt or fish or backpack or climb or hike or whatever it is, that is what it's all about. And we
Mhm.
gotta fight for it because if the people, those of us who actually get out there. If we don't fight for it, nobody else will. Because
Mhm.
folks that aren't connected to these things the way we are, they have no idea. They don't have that connection. So it's on us to do the heavy lifting to make sure that this stuff's around for the future. And so, yes, I ended that Wild Country very much with that mindset. And that book was really focused on the land, on the public lands that we have. And this next book is very much a continuation of that, but this is focused on the animals living on that land now, because you don't have one without the other. I imagine, man, if we had all these incredible public lands, but we didn't have the wildlife on it, how lonely would that be? How different would those experiences be? And vice versa. If you've got a whole bunch of critters, but we are destroying and selling off the lands that they need to survive, well, we won't have those animals for very much longer. So those two things together are, the foundation of, the what I think is what we need to, as a human species, to thrive. We have to have fellow travelers on this earth with us, and we have to maintain some wild places, some healthy ecosystems on this landscape to for us to thrive too, right? They provide ecosystem services that give us the water we need to drink, that provide the air, the clean air we need to live, and so much more. So it's, in some ways a selfish endeavor. Protecting these animals and these places is going to help us in the long run too. This is not just an altruistic thing just for nature lovers. This is something that if you live in a city and you want to continue being healthy and happy and being able to flourish, you need this stuff too.
First time you took your boys out fishing, hunting, hiking, or whatever, were you just like, please like this, please like this, please like this, have a good experience so you don't want to be inside on your phone or games? You
Well,
probably don't have your kids probably don't have phones at 7 years old, but
don't have phones. Fortunately, they were doing this stuff before they had a choice, whether what they wanted to like it or not. So I started taking them out, from the moment they were a couple weeks old. My firstborn was living in a camper for months at a time when he was 4 months old. So we lived alongside the Yellowstone River in my renovated camper for 2 months, his first summer, and another 2 months, his second summer. And so they have been camping, hiking, fishing, hunting every year of their life since the very beginning. So that has kind of built in for them that this is just kind of the way of life. And that said, I still, from the very beginning and still to this day, try to make sure that these are experiences that they're going to enjoy. I try to prioritize, their experience and making sure that I don't get caught up in my own personal goals on these trips, which sometimes is easy to do. So try to find ways to balance the two sides though. So on one side, I want to make sure they're having fun and enjoying it for all those reasons you mentioned. On the flip side though, I also have found that the outdoors is a really incredible testing ground and learning opportunity and kind of a forge for you as a person, right? And so going through some tough times in the outdoors, I think can really help build inner strength, toughness, resourcefulness, all of these qualities. And so something I've tried to balance with my boys is getting them out there, keeping it fun, but at the same time making sure they have to experience some tough stuff too, because I think that is part of necessary growth, right? Becoming comfortable with being uncomfortable, I think is a really important quality that the outdoors teaches very well. So that has been something that I'm constantly trying to walk that line with the boys. And I think we've been able to do it. There's been lots of opportunities for fun. And then there's been lots of opportunities where, man, this is kind of tough and we're going to make the best of it and we're going to make it fun. Yeah, we're backpacking and it's a blizzard and we thought it was going to be a summer camping trip and instead it's 25 and blowing snow. But this is kind of fun in its own way. Let's make it an adventure, and you make the best of it. And so, yeah, it's been good for many reasons.
you had a whole bunch of good quotables in there. So I don't know if you have any closing thoughts to go on top of that, or if you just want to kind of give the pitch to your first book and where people can find you, like, subscribe, all that stuff. What do you got?
Yeah, well, there's this line that Edward Abbey wrote, and I don't remember the specifics of it, but the general sentiment of it, I think it was a really important one. Something I try to keep in mind all the time when it comes to these types of topics that we've been discussing, that being, the many threats to public lands or wild places or wildlife. He speaks about the fact that, yeah, like, you got to be an advocate. You have to fight for these things. You have to stand up for these things. You have to speak out for these things. But on the flip side, you also need to get out there and live it and love it and immerse yourself in the wilderness and the wild places and go wholeheartedly in that way. You have to give yourself to these places and enjoy and soak up every single little bit of it, because that's the only way to have the fire and the passion to keep fighting for it. And he kind of ends this quote. I wish I had the whole thing in front of me because I'd read it to you. It's terrific. But he basically goes on this diatribe about how, yeah, you got to fight, but then just live it, love it, soak it in, get out there, because if no other reason, you will outlive the bastards. All the other folks that are trying to destroy these places, if you can get out there and love them enough and enjoy them enough and, you know, jump off into the lakes and squeeze every ounce out of this wildlife, you'll make a difference and you'll outlive those suckers, and we'll hopefully have these places for many more years to come. So yeah, if anyone wants to read that first book, That Wild Country, I think we have a few autographed copies still available over on the Meat Eater website. If you go to themeateater.com. Otherwise, you can pick up your standard hard or soft cover on Amazon. The podcast is the Wired to Hunt podcast. That can be found anywhere podcasts are. And then all of my films and TV shows and things like that are on the Meat Eater YouTube channel now. That's where this blacktail deer hunt and film will be probably sometime here in 2025, as well as plenty more. So appreciate anyone checking that out.
Awesome. Thanks for being on here, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jeff.